Welcome, everyone, to the Nerd Journey Podcast, episode number 81. We're joining you every week to talk IT career progression and bring you the advice we wish we'd been given earlier on in our careers. I'm your host, John White, at bgerman on Twitter, joined by my co-host, Nick Cordy, at networknerd_. Hey, Nick, welcome back. How's it going?
Hey, thanks, John. Back from vacation, had to come back to work, but it's all good. We're both pre-sales technical engineers with backgrounds in IT operations. We hope our career discussions will be vendor neutral, relevant across the disciplines, and remain timeless. If you're enjoying our content, please drop us a positive review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you subscribe. And if you want to get in touch with us, tweet or DM at Nerd Journey. Ultimately, we're just two nerds on a journey.
A journey to virtual enlightenment.
So let's take a trip.
All right, Nick, great. Hey, so this week we are putting out part 2 of 2 with our interview with Manny Sidhu. I would just say that if you haven't listened to part 1, it's super worthwhile to go back and listen to it. Manny had a lot to say about the role of certifications in his career and how education and seeking out that knowledge really helped him out. I thought that it was a very interesting perspective. He's really enthusiastic about those certifications. So again, if you haven't listened to it, worth going back for a listen.
Yeah, most definitely. Well, I have to say, John, I really love sequels, and I always want to see if the sequel is better than the original. I think in this case, it's just as good, if not better. I really enjoyed what Manny had to say about how he dives in and enjoys being interviewed and the experience that gives him, and that it doesn't actually make him that nervous. I think that's kind of an abnormal thing for the people I know, at least. He seems to have a leg up on a lot of people by being at ease when going into an interview.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting too, and I'm just really glad that that's what you meant by sequel. I thought you were going to make a database joke there, but anyway, I'm glad that didn't happen.
Select star from John White.
Jeez, can't believe this is happening.
Where
all right,
let's not equal 1.
Let's get to the interview. Yeah, it's interesting. It's the two effects, right? One is the thinking about the possible questions that could come up. So, wanting to prepare for that. And then the experience of being asked a question that's maybe a little bit outside of what you prepared for, right? So on the fly, you have to think and analyze, understand what the person is asking about, and then adjust your thinking, expand your understanding, and then explain what it is that you come up with. And that's a very parallel process or analogous process to what you have to do in a job interview.
100%.
So maybe we can jump into that a little bit. One of the things that we wanted to bring you on and talk about was this post that you had on LinkedIn, where you said, I really love being interviewed. And what that indicated to me was that, it was almost like a moment of realization. Maybe that was me reading a little bit too much into it, but, this understanding of personal growth, right? Where you didn't originally like being interviewed and going through that process, and then came to the realization that now you love it and it's something that, you relish. So am I right about that? Can you tell us about that process?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think I've relished the opportunity to be interviewed almost all the time. So I've always thrived on challenges and difficult situations. So these pressure situations actually try to bring the best out of me. And I'm the kind of guy that that likes presenting or enjoys being able to present my case in front of complete strangers in order to convince them to give me a job. And even my wife tells me that I would make a great salesman, and I should have been in real estate instead of IT. And I would have done much better, and we would have had a Ferrari in the garage instead of a Highlander. And she said, "Oh, okay, maybe, but this is where we are."
That's not too late to get into systems engineering. Technical sales, right? The Can you tell us about the first time or early on, your perceptions of that when you realized, oh, this is something I'm uncomfortable with and something I don't like, and then that process of growth.
I don't understand the question. Sorry, John.
Yeah, no worries. Did you always love being interviewed?
Yeah, no, I was. I think a lot of people in IT are introverts. That's my opinion, and that's what I've seen at least. So people are like, oh, I don't want to be interviewed. And I think people that have been in a company for 10, 15, 20 years and have never been interviewed, so they might be a little bit wary of being interviewed. But I bounced around jobs a fair bit. That's not to say that I don't last in a company for more than a couple of years, but I've done that. So I just have had this ability to be able to talk to strangers and tell them how I would make a great fit into the culture that they have, and help them solve the problem that they're facing.
Did you ever get the same butterflies in an interview that you got when you were giving those presentations at user conferences?
No, great question. So I think I get more butterflies when I'm speaking publicly. I don't get butterflies at all when I'm being interviewed. I'm pretty chill when it comes to being interviewed. But presenting in front of a couple hundred, 300 people, that's a lot. That's a different ball game, and I think that does give me butterflies. It still does.
Yeah, I can't blame you there. See, when
Yeah.
I read his post, John, what I read was, please someone invite me on a podcast, and that's what I did.
Too funny. That Yeah, there is that aspect to it too.
Yeah. So ever since I put that post out, I think I've helped about 15, 20 people since then. Land interviews or do better at an interview, and a couple of them actually got a job, so they thanked me on LinkedIn. So I think that was pretty cool. So me taking 5 minutes of my time to put that post out, which helped a couple of people get a job, was pretty fascinating.
Have you seen any patterns as a result of the various people who have gotten in touch with you?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So great question that too. So I think a lot of people that reach out are not well prepared for an interview, and they want to gain some tips on how to excel in an interview or how to be well prepared. So yeah, so a lot of people have reached out and told me that. So there's a pattern definitely.
What would you say is a good process for someone to follow, kind of in general, to thoroughly prepare for an interview?
Yeah, I think I've interviewed a lot of people myself, and I think one of the key points, and I think one of the biggest points is that you need to know your resume inside out. That might sound pretty obvious, but if you put something on your resume and you don't know enough about it, that might be that might be a reason for the interviewer to think that you may not have done that thing in real life. So I think you got to be really clear on what you've done in your resume, and you got to know what you did basically. And I think some of the other points that I had was, you got to make sure that you've got to research the company, the role, and the interviews maybe. Look up some news articles about the company. Maybe they've merged, maybe someone's bought them out, or maybe they bought a company, or maybe they've hired a new CTO or a new CIO or any other C-level person. And I think a lot of people struggle with the inability to make things stand out in their resume. So you got to make sure that your resume sort of gets your highlights and your achievements to pop. So when I say that, I don't mean that you put those bits in neon orange or have flickering lights in there, but you got to have a subsection within each job that you've done that shows off your accomplishments. So when you rock up in an interview, they actually know that you've done all these things, and they ask you these questions, these probing questions, and you answer them to the best of your ability and hopefully land a job. And someone else that reached out to me also said to me that they found that they rambled on and on when they were asked a question. So I suggested to the person that you got to make sure that your answers are sharp and concise. So rambling is to your detriment. So you try and use those punchlines that that you did something that resulted in improved user experience or increase the ROI or it cut down on costs by say 20%, things like that, things that normal people would easily latch onto.
Yeah, the measurability
Exactly,
of the impact of the thing that you're talking about.
exactly. And I just recalled, and someone said, "What if I don't know the answer to the question that an interview is asked?" I said, if that happens, you just be upfront. Don't try and beat about the bush, and say clearly that you're not 100% certain of the answer, But this is where you go to find the answer. And I'm sure that the interviewer on the other side will appreciate the honesty. And if they don't appreciate the honesty, I don't think you want to work with them in the first place.
Yeah, that's a good point. I remember when we interviewed Mike Burkhart several episodes ago, he said that he had trouble because his resume was too business focused, and because of that, they didn't think that he was technical enough for some of the roles. And I'm just curious, what's your advice on highlighting the right accomplishments for the role you're applying to?
Yeah. So yeah, I believe that you got to tailor your resume to almost every job that you apply for. So if there's a job that says that has a title of say a business architect for that matter, so then you have to have a resume that talks about the business angle of things. So ROI, TCO, all that, the budget and the tenders and the RFP processes and all those processes, all that good stuff. So that's where you put in those kinds of things. So that's the kind of thing that needs to pop when you are interviewing for that kind of position. But if it's a more technical position, so you got to put in things that say you implemented this, you architected that, and this is how you improve user experience, and this is how you cut down on latency by by say 20% or whatever it was. So you got to make sure that you tailor your resume to every kind of job that you apply for.
That makes sense. So that's interesting. You're saying not just have a measurable impact on your resume for each of the skills that you're demonstrating there, but um, emphasize the ones that are more aligned to the job that you're applying for. So if you're applying for, like as you said, like a more business analyst or architecture type position, then something like an implement like a technical implementation, that oh, I did this thing that cut down on implementation time by 6 weeks. Well, maybe that's not as relevant unless you can put that in the business
Exactly.
architecture terms, right?
Exactly. I think you got to just spin things the right way, the exact way that the interviewer wants to hear. So instead of saying that you implemented this solution, if you are interviewing for a business position, then you say that you improved, say, user experience, or you reduce spend by this much percent. So that's you just got to skin the cat differently. That's what I was trying to get at.
What's fascinating about that is that most companies in their job listings will tell you those things that they're looking for, right? And a lot of people seem to don't take the time to read that. Like they maybe look at the title of the thing that they're um, applying for and then skim like some of the skills and go, okay, I will apply for this, but they don't do the deep read, that take additional 5 minutes or 10 minutes to really understand what's being asked for in the job description, before applying and before starting to edit the resume. And that just blows me away. Like but maybe it's just a skill that people don't have because they don't apply for jobs that often.
Exactly. I think it's just one of those things that you actually pick up, as you progress in your career, and you tailor your resume as needed. So the first thing is that in order to be actually being called in for an interview, you got to make sure that you pass the HR filter. So if you don't put in those keywords that they're looking for, you're not going to get called in the first place. So that's the main reason why you should actually read a job description properly and make sure that you have most of those keywords that they've mentioned, and that way you clear the HR filter, and then someone's going to actually call you and say, run you through a telephone screen and then actually call you in for an in-person interview or a virtual interview these days.
And that's probably even more important during this time with many people potentially unemployed because their business shut down due to COVID.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you're competing with a lot of people for the same position, then you have to put even more time
Yeah. And
into.
I was talking to a recruiter the other day, and he says, and I think it makes sense. And he said maybe create a video of yourself, not doing funny stuff, but trying to sell yourself in the best possible way. Highlighting your skills, like a 60-minute video. That's not 60 minutes, sorry, 60-second video. Maybe a TikTok video for that matter. And he said, people that I've been doing that have actually tried to stand out, and they have stood out, and they've been called in for interviews. Yes, times have changed, and I don't think TikTok's a bad thing these days when it comes to trying to sell yourself in 60 seconds.
Well, it's a constraint, and and as a result, like it forces you to really select the things that you find most important, right? That you want to get across. So
100%.
yeah, that filter function, right? Oh, well, if I only have 60 seconds, here's the things that I'm talking about. So,
Yeah,
you're, it's a forced elevator pitch, right? If you have the 60 seconds to talk about yourself, then here's the things that are most important. And that's
yeah,
different for every position and different for different positions at different companies, right?
for sure.
What's your take, Manny, on whether interviews for people in highly technical fields are more challenging than those in less technical fields?
Yeah, I think personally, I don't think there would be a difference in the two uh, when it comes to the actual job itself. So I reckon it comes down to your personality and your preparedness when you're in front of interviews. So it might be difficult for people who've been in the same company for a long, long time, but for everyone else, I think it's about the same thing. And people might be different when it comes to interviewing, or maybe people have had their interviewing skills go rusty because they have been at the same company forever. So I think it just depends on person to person, and yeah, I don't think it matters whether you're in a highly skilled position or whether you're in a lower skilled position. Personally, that's my opinion at least.
It's funny, like every job has its technical skills, right? They just, whether it's judged as technical is sometimes it's an outside judgment and not an inside. If you, I don't know, sometimes I've talked to, like, okay, here's an example. I've talked to people who are business development reps. So in technical sales, it might be somebody who's just a little bit more focused on um, outbound kind of campaigns to call into a company to try to get an initial telephone meeting to say, hey, do you want to buy our product, right? And the skills to do that are very, very different from like maybe like a face-to-face technical sales rep who is dealing with a customer that they have a relationship with and the company already has a relationship with. And so those two jobs, like they have very different skills, and the skills that the business development rep has, like I was talking to this rep and he said, oh, I have to do this, I have to be able to do this, I have to be able to do this, and I was like, oh wow, that's way more like inside. It's like job domain, very technical, and a lot of those skills I just don't have. So if I, the idea of skills inside a job, I think are sometimes subjective or overlooked.
Yeah, great points, that John.
What about on the interviewer side? So if you're interviewing someone, which I imagine you've probably done before,
Yeah,
uh, what are some ways that you can show you're engaged, help the candidate feel at ease, and show them that you're paying attention?
yeah. I think one of the key points is that you keep the interview flowing. When I say that, I mean that you keep it two-way instead of bombarding the candidate with questions. I've had that happen to me myself too. So I keep it two-way. I keep it kind of open-ended. So it's just best to uh, open up the stage, so to say, to the candidate and ask them, what to think of a particular technology or the use case for that technology, instead of asking them about a particular setting in a, VMware VM or an AWS database, for example. I think it's just best to keep it open, and that's what I've found, that you actually get to ask those probing questions to candidates when you actually open it up, and instead of having a closed conversation with them. And I've seen a lot of people use the word "we did this" or "we did that." It's just best to use the words "I did this," "I did that." So the hiring manager wants to hear things that you did, not what your team did. And it may just be a matter of habit, but I've seen that happen a lot of times, and I've actually told people, please don't do this. You tell me what you have done and what you've achieved and how you bring value to this job, and not tell me about the team that you're part of. And I like the fact that a lot of people interview, not interview, a lot. I like the fact that a lot of people research the company that is hiring. So it just shows that you have done your homework and you're not being lazy and you know what you're here there for.
Yeah, that could be a definite differentiator. I hadn't even
Yeah.
really thought about that.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people when they rock up at interviews, they they're not clear about the main selling points. So a lot of people just say, "Oh, I'm gonna learn. And this is how I did WSS updates for a company a long time ago, or this is how I did SMS or whatever it was back then." I think the time that you spend in front of an interviewer is the time that you need to spend wisely because those 60 minutes or 45 minutes or whatever the time frame is actually your opportunity to sell yourself or to sell your skills in the best possible manner. So you should clarify things like the ability that you have to get the job done and how you handle pressure or how you handle a difficult situation. And being able, it's best to show that ability that you have to learn and adapt quickly.
Would you say that there are any specific lessons that you can think of that you learned about being interviewed from
Yeah,
doing interviews?
yeah, absolutely. So there's oftentimes when you are interviewed, you should be ready to address the concerns or reservations that the other guy might have about you being fit for the job. So you should try and make compelling arguments by telling them how you would ace the job despite you not knowing everything that they're looking for. So you got to make sure that you know where to look for things. So and I think in IT, 90% of your job is knowing how to Google. So don't say that to an interviewer, but just try and demonstrate that by this is how you would find something if you don't know the answer to something. And you should line your own questions up for the interviewer, and you keep a mental note of things that they've already told you, so you don't ask them again, and you're trying to if you do you don't make them repeat themselves. Another big thing that I've always wanted to tell people is that I personally believe that you need to score a success in the first 5 minutes of an interview. I believe that the human brain has this reward system, even if it's subconscious, even if you don't want to agree with it, but you have this reward system that gets activated earlier on than later. So it's very similar to when you're watching a good action movie, for example. So if you see a great, fantastic opening scene, and then your brain gets blown, and you actually sit up, and your brain gets activated with more receptors in anticipation of the good stuff coming in later on. So my point is that you got to make a good opening. It's to say that you read off a great speech, but my point is that you stand out in the first 5 minutes.
I really like that. So it sounds like that's something that you maybe experienced while interviewing somebody, like they hooked you early.
Yeah, exactly. And
Nice.
another thing that I've noticed is that people don't like people that complain about past jobs or past managers or past co-workers. So you're there to highlight the positives, and you don't talk about the negatives you may have experienced, unless those negatives were the reason why you left the job very quickly. Even then, you keep it mild and you keep it concise and keep it minimal. So never come across as a complainer or a whiner.
Now, how do you feel about someone taking notes in the interview? So, if I'm being interviewed, is it okay for me to take notes and write down important things or questions I think of?
Yeah, great. So I think a lot of people would have different opinions about that. I personally think there's no need to do that. If there's something that you really, really have to take note of, you should, and you just tell the interviewer up front that you're going to do this, and you say, "Oh, this is a great point. I'm actually going to make a note of that," and said, "Okay." It might come across as a little bit, what's the right word? It might come across a little bit, textbooky. I don't know. I can't fish for the right word right now, but it might come across a little bit sus, in my opinion. I wouldn't
Academic.
recommend doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And I was a long time ago. I was getting ready for an interview, and the recruiter told me, "So are you prepared?" I said, "Yeah, I'm prepared." And she asked me, "How are you prepared?" I said, "This is this, this is this, all the stuff that I'm gonna do." And she said, "Are you gonna take any notes with you?" I said, "I'm gonna have my notebook open in front of me, which will be inside of a portfolio, and I will read off those things so I don't miss anything." And she said, "Try not to do that." And I asked her why, and she says it's just best to be prepared so that in your brain instead of having to read something off a piece of paper, because it just shows more preparedness. So I think opinions will differ when it comes to that aspect, but I personally believe that you shouldn't be writing anything. Or yeah, that's just my opinion.
I suppose it depends on the style of interview,
Exactly.
and
Exactly.
like I know that for some software engineering jobs, they're asking you to actually come up with solutions and to fairly complex problems.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. Yeah. So going back to your point, John, you asked me a question just a couple of minutes ago. Is the one thing that I might want to mention to people is body language. So when you're in that interviewing room, you have to give that the positive body language. So you shouldn't be crossing your arms. You don't fidget, right? And don't let your eyes wander. And look at make eye contact with the interviewer. Listen carefully and try not to get them to repeat themselves, and try not to repeat yourself. And I would also highly recommend that you don't empty a bottle of perfume on yourself. You don't want the interview to pass out before the actual interview starts because you're wearing a very strong perfume. Those are some of the things that I've seen people do. So there was this lady that came in for an interview a long time ago, and she was wearing this very strong perfume. We almost passed out from the smell. It was a great smell, but still.
I think what people don't remember is that perfume or cologne. Like I had a very similar thing happen. A gentleman came in and he was wearing like a fairly nice mild cologne, but then when you're in a stressful situation, you tend to perspire more, and
Yeah,
perspiration activates those scents. Like
yeah,
so, staying a little bit more neutral is probably better,
yeah,
more
absolutely.
conservative.
Yeah.
So smell good, but not too good. I'm just kidding. What
I
about?
also think
Oh, go ahead.
I also think it's a good idea to send someone the interviewer a short thank you email for their time on the same day as the interview, or maybe the first hour the next day, and try to keep it short and sweet, and just tell them that you had a this is how you think that the company's values and the job itself lined up with what you're looking for. I've had a couple of people tell me a long time ago that they were pleased when they received the email, and the email was one of the reasons why I clinched the job. So it might be a good idea.
I would say it's a great idea
Okay.
because I'm pretty sure that I did something similar, and that's how I got a job too.
Yeah. Yeah. There you go then.
Yeah, that it's interesting how just simple follow-ups, that demonstrate that you were listening to the person and some things that you maybe took away from the interview. Um, that demonstration of, hey, I was listening to you. Here's what I heard you say, and here was what it prompted in my mind, and here's what I'm telling you that I got out from it. Like that kind of um, makes you maybe persist a little bit in the interviewer's mind as well.
Exactly.
How about this process of being a consultant? Because a consultant, is going from organization to organization a lot of times, and sometimes if you're an independent consultant, you're going out and getting your own work, right? So it's almost like being interviewed for a new job over and over again.
Absolutely. That's exactly how it is. So when I rock up at any potential customer, I have that feeling of being interviewed, and that's the whole point of it. So you're trying to tell them how you would solve a problem for them, and how you would translate a technical solution to a business requirement that they have.
Makes absolute sense to me. Yeah. So maybe if you are thinking about moving jobs, then one of the things that you could do within an organization is to try to move internally in an into part of an organization where you're approaching new customers or new outside partners to engage, because then you're getting practice interviewing while you're working for the company.
Exactly. Exactly.
I'm curious about remote interview tips, Manny.
Yeah.
Some people are doing a lot of those lately. Do you have any special tips for that scenario?
Yeah. I think you still make sure that you dress sharply. Make sure you still wear a suit. Maybe if it's too hot for a suit, maybe a shirt and a maybe a not maybe a tie if that's your thing, and maybe the interviewer expects that to happen. You make sure that you clear your environment where you're sitting. So keep everything professional. Make sure you look well groomed. Make sure if you make sure you shave, that kind of thing. You still make sure that you sell yourself as best as you can. And
I guess
I'm
I have
sure
to get
that.
rid of my Corona beard then.
Yeah, I've been doing a lot. I've done, I guess, two interviews in the past 2 weeks, um, that have been remote. Google usually does them on site, but uh, with Corona, it's nobody's on site anymore, and just distracting backgrounds. That can be
Yeah,
a thing.
yeah.
Like both times, the people that I interviewed had very nice, clean background offices, and it helped to not have to think about that at all. As opposed to me, I have kind of a cluttered background. So
And I'm sure that the person on the other side would appreciate the fact that you're at home and your kids might pop in or the dog might come in or stuff like that. So still got to try and make sure that you keep distractions to a minimum, like you just said.
Absolutely. Yeah. As we come close to wrapping here, Manny, I know you have to go soon. Just a couple more points. What would you say was the best career advice you've ever been given?
Yeah, I think the best advice that I've ever been given is that you give the market what it needs. So when I say that, I mean to say that you keep evolving with the market and you don't stagnate. So it's okay to take your foot off the pedal for some time so you can recharge and rejuvenate. But you need to keep moving and you need to keep stretching yourself. The human brain, I believe, works best when it's challenged. So once again, so my point is that you need to keep adjusting as the market changes. So for example, now it's everything is about the hybrid cloud and the security in the hybrid cloud. So I think those are the two spaces that you should be trying to get yourself into. So my point is that you should just keep evolving at all times and don't stagnate. And once and do your certifications. I'm big
Of
on
course.
certifications. I'm a big advocate
Yeah.
of them.
They're definitely great to learn. So, how do you, Manny Sidhu, decide what's next for you in your career?
Yeah, well, yeah. So back to my point about trying to give the market what it needs. So I keep myself abreast of changes by keeping a pulse on Twitter. I follow the right people. I don't follow any celebrities or whatever. I just follow the right people in my line of work. I subscribe to these a couple of magazines, and just keep a pulse on the market in general. And once again, you keep evolving. You don't stagnate, and you keep making changes. So you serve the market as well as it needs.
awesome, Manny. Anything else before we let you go here?
I think this should be it, and I think I had a great time and enjoyed talking to you guys, and this is one of those opportunities where I can give back to the community even more. So thanks for having me.
Really appreciate your time, Manny. Thanks a lot for joining us on the
Likewise.
Nerd Journey podcast.
Thanks, guys.
Is there a place people can reach out to you, Manny, if they want to learn more or chat with you?
Yeah, Twitter. Yes, absolutely. So my handle is Manny Sidhu 2. So you can reach out to me at any time. Absolutely. I'm also on the VExpert Slack. Sorry, I forgot about that. And yeah, that's another way to get in touch with people.
Right, and we'll put a link to the VExpert directory so folks can find you there too.
Perfect.
Okay. Well, thanks very much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thanks very much, guys.
Nick, I really liked Manny's practical advice that he gave about going to an interview, things like perfume and body language and sending, thank you notes. It was just really good, down to earth, practical advice.
Absolutely. And the part about knowing your resume inside out, because you can't possibly list every detail about something you've done on your resume, but you can highlight it in a way that it's valuable based on the job description and then elaborate on it in the interview with the person who wants to know more about it.
Absolutely. Coming prepared for that. Just that I thought was like a great little nugget. Well, anything else before we get out of here?
One thing I wanted to highlight is he mentioned that, you know, he is a consultant, and part of him meeting a new customer is interviewing. They're interviewing him, he's interviewing them. You know, if you're working in internal IT, you're kind of interviewing an end user or someone else at the company about a problem they're having. That's how I thought of it.
Yeah, anything can be an interview, like where you're probing for a good fit to see if like you're understanding the status of the person coming in, knowing if you have the right fit for them, that kind of thing. It's a really good observation.
Yeah, and then the part about the recruiter that advised him to record a 60-second video to sell yourself and your skills, that's one I hadn't heard that maybe we should all think a little bit more about as the market gets competitive.
Yeah, it's the classic elevator pitch, right? But you don't have 3 minutes, you have 1 minute. So how is it that you describe yourself?
Yeah. I describe myself as ready to get out of here. So 1 minute to close it out, right?
1 minute to close it out.
Just a reminder, we want people to subscribe and give us a positive review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening. We want to know if we're being helpful and are always looking for interesting questions to ponder. We're collectively on Twitter @NerdJourney, and that is the place that you can tweet to sign up for the John White School of Mentoring. Pricing and packaging to come. Needed that within the 30-second mark, or 60-second mark, excuse me.
Nice. Farewell, listeners. Tune in next time as the journey continues. I'm John White at B Journeyman for Nick Cordy at Network Nerd _ signing off.
Adios.